Hello there, Happy New Year, and welcome back to Joe's World of Finance. Today we're going to be talking about my 20 predictions for Tesla's 2020.
Look now at the universe.
Okay, so we got delivery numbers last week and I already made a video about that. There is a lot of interesting stuff happening right now, and 2019 was definitely the year of the Model 3, but 2020 is going to be the year of the Model Y. Now, the Model Y is a slightly larger version. It's a crossover utility vehicle, a CUV, similar to the Model 3. In fact, it shares the same platform, right, which is the powertrain and skateboard at the bottom, and it shares a lot of the same components, and so it's actually going to have some excellent profitability because they've already gotten the Model 3 production lines quite efficient, and so they're able to reuse that. So my number one prediction is that we're going to see Model Y go into mass production, hitting 1,000 units per week by the end of half one. So that is end of June. So we'll see the first deliveries by early Q2, which will be March, April. Which I think they've said that they'll get deliveries by the middle of the year, but I think they're going to be earlier than they're saying. They've actually been sandbagging a lot recently, and I think we'll see the impacts of that delay in their estimation, and then be able to sort of be early on that for once. Usually Tesla is very late on their estimations. So that's number one. Model 3, so number two is that Model 3 in China, they've just started producing them last month, or the month before last, and they started delivering them this month. So we've sort of seen the first vehicles roll out of the China Gigafactory in Shanghai, but I'm predicting that they will scale up to 5,000 units per week by the end of 2020. And I actually think that might be conservative, but they've already demonstrated a capacity for 3,000 units a week, but very often when they give that kind of production capacity estimation, it's based on maybe 1 or 2 hours of production or 1 day of production that's been extrapolated out, but they often have unforeseen problems at certain times, which makes it fluctuate around that number. Maybe it doesn't average out like that, and so we've been disappointed in the past. So while they've hit 3K now, it could take sort of 3 months before they're consistently at 3K, and I think as they have to produce. Well, the second half of this production is that Model Y will begin early production in China by the end of the year. So they'll try to scale up Model 3 as much as possible using all of the capacity, but then sort of as they become a bit more comfortable around their ability to produce the orders in China, then we'll see increased production of Model Y in China by the end of the year. The third prediction is that the semi-truck is going to go into production by half two. Now, this is kind of cheating. There's a letter that's been released to pre-order holders. I'm going to make a whole video about that, but it's outlining some of what they've been doing towards the semi-production, and they are estimating that they will have production ready by half two, early stage production. So we're not talking mass production, we're talking maybe a few hundred units, but that'll be really great to see that sort of rolling off the production line, because they've been talking about the semi for a long time. It's kind of been in the back of everyone's minds, and it's another one of these sort of pillars of the short argument. It's like, where's the semi? They predicted it and they outlined all of the specs, and it hasn't rolled out. Number 4 is that the Plaid Model Y upgrade increases Model S sales. Sorry, did I say Model Y? Plaid Model S sales will increase the Model S in general in its popularity temporarily, but then it will drop back off again. So what they're doing is they're doing a full performance upgrade on the motor interaction. So it's a tri-motor version of the Model S using a different powertrain, and that's actually able to get around the famous, I'm going to butcher this name, the Nürburgring racetrack that's very popular for standardized testing of new vehicles, and they've actually set the unofficial record against the Taycan with the Plaid Model S. So I think that hype around the track will get a boost in sales temporarily for the Model S. The biggest prediction, which I think is going to be sort of important here, is that Q1 and Q2 of 2020 are going to be incredibly rough for Tesla's financials, especially considering the free cash flow that we've seen and the profitability. We're going to see squeezed margins as the macro sales are sort of weak. So in general, vehicle sales for all automotive companies are weaker in Q1 and Q2 in half one than they are in half two. And this is just because it's a seasonal business. People tend to buy cars towards the end of the year. And so what will happen is we're going to see Tesla increase their inventory in half one, I believe. The reason for that is because they've expended a lot of their inventory. If you look at the last 2 quarters, so half two of 2019, they sold more vehicles than they produced, right? In Q4, the numbers that we just got, they produced 105,000 vehicles and they delivered 112,000. Right, so that means they already had been holding on to 7,000 of those vehicles. Now, that will help profitability in Q4 because the costs of those vehicles would have been in Q3. But it means that moving forward, they're going to have to produce more vehicles to replace those because now they have none to sell. They haven't historically been very big on inventory, but I think now as we're hitting this huge scale that we're going to increase the inventory in half one. Now this will look very weak. We're going to have decreased margins, as I said, because they're ramping up Model 3 and Model Y. Model 3 in China, Model Y in the US. And when you're ramping up a vehicle, you're making very few of them, but you still have that huge capex cost that you need to recoup. And so every single one of those vehicles has to carry a percentage of that cost, and that's higher if you have less vehicles. And that's going to mean that the margins that they're selling them for are going to be lower than we're sort of expecting out of Tesla now that we've seen these great margins on the Model 3. So that's going to be some weak signals for Q1 and Q2 in terms of the cash flow. So 6, we're going to see Model 3 margins improve even further, especially in China. Model Y by the end of the year will show margins unlike we've seen before. It's going to be able to leverage a lot of the benefits the Model 3 has already seen while having a higher average selling price, selling for like 49,000, 60,000. It's going to have all of the same sort of software sales and all of those other margin boosts. They've also had this acceleration over-the-air update that they've been able to do. A big part of this is following on to number 7 is that full self-driving will cost $10,000 by the end of the year. Now, it's been steadily increasing. I think we'll see 2 to 3 full self-driving package cost updates because as they create more and more functionality, more and more features, it brings more value. And so they're wanting to charge more for it. And they want to avoid having a huge step change once they hit full autonomy, which, I'm not going to get into that with this video, but, once they eventually get there, they're going to want to have a huge step change in the price. They're not going to want to sell you something that can turn your car into a robo-taxi and make you $200,000 for $7,000. They're going to want to sell it for $40,000. And so they're going to steadily increase the price. This also serves as, and a side note, by the time that pre-orders sort of hit the end of the road, we actually have to pay. So Cybertruck, 2021, 2022, they come to people and say, you need to now pay for your Cybertruck. People won't cancel the reservations because they've already locked in their full self-driving price from 2 years before when it was $7,000 and now it's $20,000 by the end of 2022 or something like that. It's hard to predict out that far, but I think it's very conservative to say we'll continue our linear extrapolation and we'll hit 10K by the end of next year. Number 8, Starlink begins early access connectivity. So Starlink is an initiative from SpaceX, another Elon company, that has been launching these satellites. They just launched another 60, which sets them up, close to 200, I think. And that network is now the largest privately operated network of satellites in the world, and it's going to operate some high bandwidth, low latency connectivity broadband for the globe. And that's going to lead to increased margins on premium connectivity for Tesla because they'll be able to get a good deal on the data rates. Shout out to a commenter on a previous video who talked about that as well. It's a really good point. I think at the same time, we're going to see premium connectivity costs increase. It's quite cheap right now in a monthly subscription of only $10, so we could potentially see that go up to $15 or $20. I think 20 might be a bit steep, so maybe 15, but I think that we'll really start to see some nice profitability because that's mostly margin, right? It's mostly profit. It's something that they were actually having to pay for before, but they were just giving it away for free to get people sort of interested and used to how it was like a free trial. And so now that's just going to turn into more and more profit. So we're going to see number 9, that in February they're going to announce at their Battery and Powertrain Investor Day. I've talked about this before, but they're going to release a 1,000,000-mile battery, which doesn't mean on one charge. It means over its lifetime. It will be able to drive 1,000,000 miles before breaking down completely. And they'll also announce cobalt-free battery chemistry. Now, this is very significant because cobalt is a metal that's only able to get out of war-torn areas in like Uganda and in these other areas where it's a conflict metal, and it's entirely unethical and incredibly difficult to get out, quite expensive, and so the 1,000,000-mile battery with cobalt free will actually remove a huge bottleneck and an ethical issue with the production of their batteries, which will help them scale up their production quite substantially. I think we'll also see that they're going to remove the need of toxic solvents in the battery process, which actually removes a whole step in the battery generation. So I think that space, once they free that up, that it could be interesting to be used for, say, Cybertruck building. So if we get into number 10, I think a big thing that's going to happen in 2020 is they'll start getting into more commercial fleets. We just saw the first sale to a German taxi company. Because the running costs of electric vehicles are roughly half of a gasoline or a diesel vehicle, we're going to see that it becomes a lot more attractive to these sort of government incentivized or completely owned fleets and even police vehicles and other cars like this, because it has high acceleration, good performance, and low running costs. It's going to become more economical to buy these, $35,000, $40,000 vehicles, especially like if we're talking a bit down the track once the Berlin factory's done. It'll be very cheap in Europe because they won't have to pay all the shipping and tariffs and all of that. But even just in the US, even in China, I think we're going to see some police vehicles, some taxi vehicles, maybe government vehicles like luxury for Model S, maybe Model X. They're safe, they're robust, they're performant, and they're quite affordable, especially if they were to make a group discount. So we could see some large sales here in the order of tens or hundreds of vehicles per deal. And I think this has not been an option before because they've been production constrained. They've been able to only just make as many as they can and sell all of them. And now they have orders like piling up. But now that they've sort of churned through that and they've hit mass production scale, it's possible that they might have this excess, especially as I said, Q1, Q2, orders volume goes down. Suddenly they've got all these excess vehicles. They're going to sell them in bulk. So especially once the million-mile battery goes in, unit economics become beautiful. Number 11, they announced Gigafactory and battery tech licensing to other OEMs. So other car companies will be able to pay them to build their own Gigafactory using their patented manufacturing processes to improve other car companies' margins. And out of that increased margin, they'll be slicing a bit of profit off the top there to pay Tesla. So I think they'll announce this with a deal with an OEM already in place to avoid speculation. And I think that this will either be Volvo or Fiat Chrysler. Fiat Chrysler just merged with Peugeot, but I think that conglomerate with the additional cash savings they've got, perhaps they'll pour that into Tesla factories, because if you're going to get into EVs, Tesla already has the manufacturing processes down pat because they're vertically integrated, and now it's time that they start to see more dividends from that vertical integration. They've just crossed that chasm. They've spent the billions, the tens of billions in capex to invest in these technologies, and now they'll be able to license them out for billions in revenue with none of the costs of constructing the factories themselves, just from the technology they've built. So talking about those mergers, I think number 12 is that we'll see another enormous merger between two large legacy automakers. We've just seen Fiat Chrysler merge with Peugeot to make a $73 billion behemoth this year, or rather 2019, last year. So I think we're going to see it's sort of a mature market now, automakers. There hasn't been a new entrant for 100 years that's been highly successful. And so I think that we'll start to see these companies start to sort of aggregate in the same way we've seen entertainment business become essentially just Disney and then, Fox, but they're starting to sell off parts to Disney as well, and maybe Sony, right? So you've sort of got only a few players in this space, and they're all sort of owned behind the curtain. Because if you look at Volkswagen, they own many, many brands. You've got Fiat Chrysler, Peugeot now, and Toyota's enormous, and you've really only got, say, 4 or 5 very large automakers now, and I think we'll perhaps see one of those group into two of those group into one. So 13 will be that, okay, Q1 and Q2 will be weak for Tesla's financials, but I think that half two, and this is what Elon has said, he said that Q1 and Q2 will be rough, but Q3 and Q4 are going to be beautiful. That's what he called it. I think it's going to be beautiful because it's going to be insanely profitable for Tesla. If we look at the projections for the Model 3 made in China, I said that they would hit 5,000 vehicles a week. I think that's a little conservative, but their price will have dropped. They'll become a lot more attractive to the market, and their margins will have increased a lot because they've been able to bring in all of the parts they need into China ordering, so that they're not having to bring it across border, which is they're paying tariffs on all of this, which is eating into their margin, plus the benefits of scale. Model Y will be at scale in Fremont. We'll have the ZEV credits, the zero emission vehicles credits, and the equivalents globally that Tesla's able to sell, because they don't sell gasoline vehicles, they just sell electric. So they have all these excess credits that they can just sell for cash to other automakers who aren't carrying their weight in building new energy vehicles. Software offerings will be increased. They've already released the acceleration boost. They've got premium connectivity. They'll be able to start bringing forward full self-driving revenue. So when they sell a full self-driving package, it actually goes into account receivables. And as they bring out new functionality for full self-driving, they start to recognize that revenue. So even though they sold, $500 million worth of full self-driving in the past, they actually haven't recognized that revenue in their books. And so that can help with profitability, same as ZEV credits. Between those, that could be $1 billion in revenue that they haven't recognized, or sort of free money. And the last part of that, that's number 13, is energy and solar will be 3 to 4 times bigger than it is now. If we move on to 14, my prediction is that they're going to produce at least 550,000 vehicles in 2020, which will be a 67% increase from this year. Now, that is probably my most aggressive and bullish projection, is that, you know, they increased 50% from 2018 to 2019, and that for me to predict that they would increase more than that this year, that's obviously quite aggressive. But, you know, based on my calculations, they already did 105,000 vehicles produced in America, you know, per quarter, this quarter in Q4, or last quarter in Q4. So, you know, times that by 4, that's 420,000 vehicles. If they're doing 3,000 in China, but I say that they get to 5,000 by the end, then say that that averages out to, you know, 4,000 per week. That's 200,000 vehicles. That alone will take us to 620,000 vehicles. So just the back of the napkin math there in my head, but I think the 550, while it may seem aggressive because it's 67% higher, I think it's quite doable. 15, another aggressive one, they'll be doing 1,000 roof tile installations from the solar side of the business per week by end of year. Obviously, we don't know exactly how many they've done because they only just started this quarter, and we will in Q4, and we haven't gotten those numbers yet. But as soon as we see that report by the end of this month, we'll sort of have a good idea how they're tracking. They had set a goal of 100, maybe they do say 80, but they're trying to get the process down to be really efficient. But then also they're allowing third-party installers to install them, which means it's not just limited on Tesla hiring these installers. They can have thousands of these installers going out and doing this and selling it to you know, be the construction company building the house, and then they can upsell you some Tesla roof tiles, which will probably have better margins for them than traditional tiles because they're more expensive, but they actually get to benefit from the solar side of things. Whereas normally your construction company is going to install the roof tiles, and then the homeowner will go to some third-party solar roof company like SunEdison or something like that and get those panels separately. So now that they have these third-party installers, the construction companies can profit and benefit from this. And so I think they'll be incentivized to sell you these roof tiles over traditional tiles. So that's 1,000 roofs per week. I'm fitting a lot of this into this video. If you're watching all the way along to this point, thanks so much. Make sure you subscribe and like the video for the YouTube algorithm. But we get on to number 16, last 5 here. I'm projecting that they're going to produce at least 100 gigawatt hours of battery capacity this year. They did, you know, 35, you know, last year. And I think that, you know, 100 is aggressive, but considering they've said they want to get to 1 to 2 terawatt hours of production to really move the needle, you know, once we take into account licensing and things like that, I don't want to put too many numbers on the licensing side, but I think Tesla alone will be able to do 100 gigawatt hours with their new generation of battery that we haven't yet seen properly unveiled, but you know, based on all of the vehicle estimations around the range of the Cybertruck, the range of the Roadster, you know, some of these promises they're making, I think they have to be doing this amount of batteries for them to be able to fulfill those promises. And that out of that 100 gigawatt hours, we'll see that Tesla Energy is becoming a larger proportion of that total production. Number 17, I think they'll announce that the Berlin factory will produce battery cells and not just battery packs. So right now, Panasonic in America and LG Chem and what is it, CATL in China are producing the cells, and that's commoditized lithium-ion cells that they're then manufacturing into these large, Tesla is manufacturing into these large battery packs. I think there's been some evidence that's been released that the Berlin factory will actually be, and this sort of, Germany has been a pioneer in the battery industry for many, many years. They'll actually be manufacturing the cells there. I mean, they bought Highbar Systems, which was a German company that specialized in the manufacturing of battery cells. So I don't think it's out of the realms of possibility that they take the tech from Maxwell that they bought, you know, last year, and they take it over to the German Berlin Gigafactory. And within the next sort of year or two, we start to see the sort of announcements that they're going to scale up battery production there, which I think is a lot of what the money they have in the bank is for. 18, they will not reveal the cheap China designed vehicle that Elon has alluded to at the launch of the Gigafactory in China. So when he did the funny dance and he spoke to you know, the public in Shanghai, he did talk about his passion and love for the Chinese culture and wanting to work more with Shanghai in the future. But he also mentioned that they were going to design a cheaper, more mass market, smaller vehicle for China, you know, within the 20 to 30K range, US dollars. I think we won't see much news on that this year just because of everything else that is happening. 19, I think we'll see some updated specs for Roadster 2, which will improve its range estimate to over 600 miles. I think we could see above 700, but that's maybe pushing it a little bit, as well as a 1.8 0 to 60 miles per hour. You know, they're currently saying 1.9, but I think with their estimate, with the acceleration boost that they've put into the other vehicles, discounting that a little bit because it's already so fast, we might see that improvement. As well as number 20, we will see Cybertruck in popular culture. It'll become an icon in music videos and movies. We'll get more details on the ATV, the all-terrain vehicle, the little quad bike that they drove up onto the back of the Cybertruck. We're going to get more details there, but otherwise we will not hear more about the Cybertruck. Okay, so that's been a whole lot of information. I'll be breaking down more of this stuff individually, but I also talk about, I'm going to be talking about other parts of finance as well and my investing strategy, just because I'm still learning, but I've managed to do fairly well over the last sort of 6 years of investing. And I want to share the things that I've learned with you. So if you're interested in learning more about that, then make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, hit a like on this video for the YouTube algorithm, and leave a comment in the comments below where, if you think that any of my projections make sense, or if any of my predictions are just complete nonsense. I'm very happy to open up a conversation here. These are all just my opinion based on what I've read and what I've watched. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.